Tene tatanda tangpo tahideli kyojutang. Tene tate jisla jerdo ngaranso tatambe chu nyamselempe kap ina yon rong. Tambe chu nyembe kap ina yon rong. Kantaraya. Tene somba kuhong cheparachin gupa chaytang. Tene telaya chitang tene jui kulong tong, tuji kulong sung yore la. Tene tangpo tang ngaranso che namba ndana la chu dhru gugudu som. Tene chu nyamlin si gugudu som. Chu la tepa tong mugu che parachin chi, kulong che parachin chi la chi te, pepare la. Tene tepe kalwa zangpo tuji che kyo jire la. Tene tuji kulong gong te se na ya, kap la tangpo jui kulong te yakpo yo na ya tuji kulong te se kap la tene sen namto gong te kyorndo andabo tene yungi yo jire la. Tene te se du kulong nambar mara bandabo ya kap la che sekere. Tene te tabo yon ta chitang chewa te hajang dupo kamare ngaranso thoma mepa de kamba pacha re te ina ya tenzo la tenhi paye tene kumong ngamba tenzo che ma hirwa che ta tene te kendo kumong chungu onde sena ta ngaran jibu rangdan nyerwa tabo che ina ta te tambi chu jung de sena kumong ja chungu da bo che yin becherna te tabu kumong ina ya ma yupa che ta namkin ta dong nyampe senjin tamchi ke tanto ngaranzo ko tambi chu dugi yin de chado la tambi chu nyen ke yin samba tende kumong song chun chuk de senji de sen naro che.
First of all, good morning. And having said that, when we practice Dharma or listen to Dharma, it is important that we have a particular motivation for doing so. Now, with regard to motivation, there are really two aspects to it. There is your fundamental motivation, and there is your present motivation. Obviously, the fundamental motivation of all of you in coming here is the thought, I must practice Dharma. And because of that faith, that intention, that commitment, and so forth, you have come here. So your fundamental motivation is beyond question. However, the problem we face is that although our fundamental motivation may be genuine, because thoughts constantly arise in our minds, we can lose track of that motivation, and our motivation can become diminished or altered. We should not regard this as too terrible a thing. It is not surprising, since, after all, we have a beginningless habit of such negative thinking. But nevertheless, it does need to be rectified. So therefore, please reaffirm your fundamental motivation, and especially remember that to engage in the listening, study, and practice of Dharma for the benefit of yourself alone is, from the point of view of Dharma itself, a lesser or small motivation, and try to have the motivation of wishing to study and practice for the benefit of all beings.
Tene ta kasinga tuile, kasinga kapsula, tene jenchi pardo kapte yubare. Ta tanda jenchi pardo sena tandi gi nekapte rela. Tandi gi nekapte imbicherna, tandi gi nekap la, ta ngaranso che sabza chene tuidan namba jondo, che nyamne yapo, che la zanto pate kalchewa tende tembare. Tene ta teringa kapsula huya te, ta chitanga pardo la namba ye penani, pardo nipa, cheke pardo senkete rela. Tene cheke pardo senkete, ta tangbo, jenchi pardo kete nro ne, ta ngarang la chichinche tre ne zangte, tene rinbi chuni ke nongwa te hyargi yore la. Tene te ma hyarga pardo la, tene cheke pardo seke yore. Tene ten cheke pardo sewa te yang, ta chitang wangdo se na, ta ngaranzo tamal pa, tene tambe chue je go la lo ma yu pa, tambe chue je nyamne se ma nyong wa ta pa je yen na, ta te ti kapsa la njito ta, dungal ta, tene ta tinde namba na sopa mangbo yore rete yina ya ta tambi chu dan trepa che yina ti kapsula ya ta te tanda tu kap sangbo da bo che la tene jortu yore la tene te ya phajik tamba sanji ke hyal ni songna chiwa main te namjur songjung ge ba yen ji tene chiwa mare tene namjur ba de sang chung je ba re tene song re la ta sang chung je ba de kandi je re se na jerdo chiwa sing ki te tangaran so lutin je wa na bo ji re lutin je wa na bo ji re te yin na ti ne ta de kandi je re re se na 당보 제용 값을라 되는 나란좀 코르웨근 춘홍 제 샤르네 되는 코르웨근 춘홍 넘바나 소바지 샤르네 되네 다텔 트루바 만다와 넘바나 소바 중아래라 되는 치유 값을라 칸디진 로기 요아르세나 되니 대 사자 연도 될런 로한다고 마인바 되니 대 rim지 당보 나란쪽 트루바데 간이 용기 요아르세나 추지 연세나 양다 대화르기 비님보세나 양다 되네 다 디게 이게 내룩 따이니 저런 트루는 거요 저런 트루네 당본 트루바제 인정 되는 트루바니 인정 되는 트루바 som정 되는 트루바나 만나서 바데 샤르기 요아래라 단 치유 값을라 되니 림비 그 저도네 tini tin truba di tsor doni tini chuni glong pa donro jay da tini jewa chima di tsor yundu tela yang jar to chuni glong ni tsor chur ni tini truba chuni de ngoma hi bala tini ta di rimji yang chulung go yore la tini namjur sangchung jeba yin sungkin te ta di ye kapsula tsur do yundu tela tene ngara lamji gambe ge nyamnyong te ta ye wesar khawa ti ni tene chuni mabun thi se tene tikap sal ngohi banda bo che chongne tene ta tel tene be to pa che par che jul che ju ya pa ta tene tela go pa che par che jun ju ya pa la tene teacher na ta ti ge che kap te kandi ji yung ge ya pa ti hi go pa che ta tene te hi ne te nyam se len ta kandi go ge ya pa te ta te hi pa te kal che war
To continue from where we left off yesterday we studied the first of the 4 intervals or bardos, the interval between birth and death. And this interval means right now, what we are experiencing. And principally what was taught about this was that we need to be careful to make sure that we use the opportunity of this life, the period between birth and death, for the practice, and how important this is. Now we turn to the second of the 4 bardos or intervals, which is called the interval of the time of death. Now this interval begins when you encounter toward the end of your life, encounter the condition which will be the proximate cause of your death, and it lasts until at the conclusion of the process of dying, the appearances of dharmata arise. Now this period of dying is for an untrained person, someone unfamiliar with Dharma, normally a period of great fear and anxiety. But if you are trained in Dharma, it can rather be a great opportunity. About this, Padampa Sanjay said, "Death is not death, it is a little awakening for the yogin." Now what did he mean by this? What we call death is nothing more than changing bodies, leaving one body and finding another one. But what happens when you do that is that the particular bewildered appearances that have lasted throughout the preceding life come to cease. Now these bewildered appearances arise when you are born, and they persist for the duration of that life. Death is not so much going to another place as it is the withdrawal of these bewildered appearances into their source. All bewildered appearances arise from the ground of being, which is itself the Dharma Dhatu and Buddha nature. At death, these bewildered appearances are withdrawn back into the expanse of Dharmata. Now, as long as this ground is not recognized, these bewildered appearances will gradually re-arise. But if this is recognized, through having familiarized yourself with the clear light in meditation, then the clear light you've cultivated in meditation as a path will meet with the clear light that is the basic ground, and you will recognize it. So it is therefore important to study and understand how to bring about this recognition.
Tene ta tela ya ta ti take na to tandako. So na chitang konso chut churba nyamne cheparchin te nam. Tene gomba zop kap tan chewe kap la kande yung yore se na tene kahi tene be nyamne yapola tende jalus pedro. Tene jalus pe se na ta chitang chutang chi toni imbala. Tene nyamnyo cheparchin tuji lan chungwa la tene ta marab noa te chewe kapsala rangin ki pa yal roju ya pandabo te yal ne tene kuzu jata to yal ne rangin ki ta te penro ki jalus penro ki wara la te ta ta yang kahi kulu mapong bang kache to samba se ta kulu pa ma go rangin ki ta bi king house penro wara ta tende jibu cheparchin tende sungi wara la ta te ta bi yin tene Bardo ke chanda boda chiwe ke chanda bo hira kan yo mare ta nyamni tartsambala tene cheparchin tende yungi yo re la ta te le kapndar ta kansung gre se na namjor pa thama se ta nyamni te cham che to mamin pa te ta bo ta tene konsa phalpa ta chitang me phalpa ta chilu la tene te sungi yore la ta kapndar tene te chitang da bo te yapo te hakona tene range chewe ke kaptana la tene semte ripa dem tene je nyemon bo ondo mahyorwa je nangdo go ondo mahyorwa je tene tari ge nengwa chembo imbicherna te la ripa dem na be gupa chembo tan temba imbicherna ta kapndar tangbo chewe ke cholte sungi yore la tene chewe ke cholte ta chitang ke chi chewe cholto nangi chewe ke chol namba ni ta tila chi nyung kom ta nyunga chitang ke sachu menung ke kom ta tene ta te yendo mek nawa na chi la sopa remji temni tembe ke chol je tangbo song yo are la tene te yang ta chitang ke te kandi chiri se na tangbo ngaranzo jie yung gab la, lu di cha yung gab sa la yang tene sa, jo, me, long, namka tene namhi se na yang ra, namka se na yang ra ta di ke namba nga tene te yang sawa sai kom len yin hirwa chui kom tene dre me kom yang yin yuwa long kom tene ta tomba ta salwa namhi ta namka kamte ta nyuwa nga dabo che la tene nyuwa nga te yungi yuwa la ta ti nyuwa nga te rimji je ne tangpo che Bardo nga ransu ta mesi che la depe kaasa la yung kande che ki yuwa re se na nyuwa nga te la tene tene te nyuwa nga te pa koransu kanga cha nyombo dabo che chamna tene zubo te debo dabo che ta nyuwa nga te cha ma nyona tene zubo te yung ma dewa dabo che yungi yuwa re la tene ten tama njengro kaasa la yung kande re se na tene rimbi ki nyuwa nga bo te che la che ne tene tar tamchi pa temne tene ta chuni ki ngonda pa donro yuwa re la teacher na njengro yuwa re
In discussing the interval of the time of death, our text first of all points out that this is not a description of what happens to the greatest of practitioners. Because the greatest of practitioners, through their realization, achieve a state that causes a conventional process of dying and the conventional experiences that occur immediately after death not to occur. Some of the greatest of practitioners achieve what is called the rainbow body. A rainbow body refers in general to the dissolution, the physical dissolution and disappearance of the physical body of the practitioner at the time of their death. This occurs as a result of their consummate realization of the emptiness of all dharmas, causing all impure appearances, even the appearance to others of their physical body, to dissolve. Other supreme practitioners with equal realization take their bodies with them, and in their body they go to what are called the celestial or Kachari realm, which is a type of pure realm. In either case, because of the person's realization, there is no talk of an interval or bardo of any kind occurring. So what follows is an explanation of how death is experienced by lesser practitioners and by ordinary persons who are untrained. The value of understanding and recollecting the stages of dying is that by doing so, you will be able to identify each stage as it occurs, and this will be of great benefit in affording you the opportunity of recognition. Here, the stages of death are divided into two phases, which are called external death and internal death. External death is the dissolution of the four elements and the five senses. Now, when we are born, that is to say, when our physical body starts to grow and develop during gestation and culminating in birth, what develops is five elements. Here, the five elements are the four material ones: earth, water, fire, and air, and the fifth can be considered to be either consciousness or space, which in this case have the same fundamental meaning. What is meant by the five elements here is the four characteristics of physical matter, and the fifth here being the cognition of the being. The characteristics are earth or solidity, water or cohesion, fire or heat, and air or movement. And as your body develops during the process of gestation, what is growing or increasing is these four qualities, and along with them a fifth, which is your cognition, unity of emptiness and lucidity, which can also be thought of as space. Now, after the gestation period is completed for the duration of your life, when the elements are in balance, you experience what we call health, and when the elements are out of balance, you experience what we call sickness. At the end of your life, what happens is the elements dissolve one into another, and that causes and culminates in the destruction of your body as a viable biological support.
Tene ta teya tanda ta tangbo jeyung kapsula jerdo yihi jilong le jilong ni pa yihi jilong de ta hendo salwa ta tembo ndabo la le jilong de ta rang ge migi le so pa la tene lutin je lemba ti ge hyuk ndabo de le jilong ge hyuk ge tene ta kro le jilong ge nupa de mazu ko par de la tene nege yo la tene le jilong de ta kam de na la so na le jilong jen do lo sum de ta le jilong ge nupa ndabo de te ji se ne tene chiwa de yung kapsala tene ta ti ge nupa de jitang ge le jilong ge nupa de kaban do ge yo de se na chang kho lo nga la tene chang kho lo nga la do ge yo la Teni Zang Kolo Nga Lan Ro Yopati, Zang Kolo Nga Lan Ro Long Nupati, Tesi Nyamne, Teni Yunga Tenzo Remji Tumgi Yorela, Teni Teyan, Tachitang Long Tela, Long Nga Sungi Yore, Ta Nyamne, Sonzen, Tursil, Teni Chabzi, Menyam, Zeta, Genjo, Zeta Long. Nga sungi yore la long abo tenzo teni te rimbi ki nupatra rabo te zi nyamne te nyambe top ki teni za tenzo nupatra rabo te sur doni nyam yung yore la teni te nyamba la teni nyong abo te sur do yung yore teni te yang tangbo teni nyong nga do ki sur de tongbo David Zankorte na long yugi yoba tenzo nubati nyong du tela teni David Zankorte nyam David Zankor nyamba la teni ngaranzo nyong nga na ne sai komte chola temba sai komte chola temgi ware la teni tela jitang kapndar tege na ma chita ta nang ta sang ta namba som ware Teni chita se na ngaranzo yen ji ta kapsala tan dende raboti namjur tende ji yungunduga sambatela chita se non ta se na ta ngarang chunong de chor do yongate chunong de ta tanda ngaranzo chunong ji hyage yorala chunong de masalawa pando atela non ta sunge yor Teni sangwe ta sunge de kare sunge yore se na chunong de pa yan ro de tela teni nang chuni ge no de te saldo dago jin ro ge yore la tela sangwe ta se ta te nyam to pa chebar jin yo na te ngo hi ge yo nyam to pa chebar jin me na te tama ji ngo hi tu ge yo ma re la teni tela sangwe ta se ta chitang ge chita ta nang ta sangwe ta nang pa sumre ta sa chola tempe ka so la chita kan de ha ge yore cho me la tempe ka so kan de yung ge yore se ta te ramba yin da so yore
Da long ngapote de nyamne sokzin genju tosel o menyam
genju
chabje ore menyam da chabje When you are first born, and born here refers to the very beginning of the process at conception and so on, what enters into the birth is your fundamental winds. And these are a combination of two types of wind. One is a wisdom wind, which is lucid and stable. And the other is karmic wind. And karmic wind is fundamentally the momentum of your various karmas or actions, both virtuous and unvirtuous. And it is that momentum which drives you into and itself enters the place of birth. At death, what is happening is that this karmic wind, having been used up, is starting to shut down. And as the karmic wind shuts down, all of the processes that are driven and maintained by that karmic wind shut down in turn. During your life, the winds, both karmic and wisdom, inhabit the 5 chakras. And as these winds start to weaken, then the elements which are seated in the various chakras start to dissolve one into another. Now, with regard to the karmic winds, there are 5 principal ones that are present during your life within your body. And these are called the pervasive wind, the digestive wind, the life or vitality wind, the upward moving wind, and the eliminating eliminating wind, or downward movings. Now, when the channels start to break down because the winds within them are no longer functioning, the elements dissolve one into another. This process begins with the channels and winds at the navel chakra. And as these start to shut down, the element of earth dissolves into the element of water. Now, in this case, and in each of the following stages, there are 3 signs that will occur. And here these are called outer, inner, and secret signs or indications. The outer sign of each stage of dissolution is what can be observed by an observer, that is to say, someone other than the dying person who looks at the dying person. The inner sign is the dying person, him or herself's own experience of the withdrawal, diminishment of the bewildered appearances of this life. And the secret sign is the corresponding clarification or intensification of the fundamental appearances of Dharmata. This last sign is called secret because it is normally only experienced or recognized by those with special experience and realization. In any case, for each of these first stages of dissolution, there will be one of each of these 3 types of indications.
Tene ta te tabu kapsula tene perna tan chwa pote kandi gugre sena tene te ta ti kapla kapkala jitwa jegre kapkala sena johi jegre semba joa yungre yime dewa yungri yore semchal rabo yungri yore tene yendo la choyin rabo tsendi no la choyin rabo yungri yore te yina ya tenzo la hajang guba tong pentu yo mare la tene ti kapsala ngarange ta ngarange longwa yaboje tembe ke chetula ripa dremne tene nyangin ke manamba tene jitog manamba jitwa on the mahyorwache tene sembati dremne ta ngarange je ya solwata pe yulla solwata to pa je ta tene ngarange sem ripa teso tinzo ya tene ripa dremne ta taripe kalcheware sombata pa je on the sena sem chayin on the mahyorwa jitwa on the mahyorwache tene ripa dremne ta tikap tna la ngarang lam go yaboji top go ba yin bichna ripa drem go yodela tene ta tel chiwa tel tro sinkin raboji yin na ya ta tipen neo raboji yin na ya tene tikap tna la je nyemo ba chodong ji wi jon rabum meyo tap tene je chayin ma ji we tap yedang ma ji we tap je lepo jambo tene tela te si hidop rabo ya je pe tap tene je ta tikap tna la ripa maimba se maimba tende si gogre ta pe zaza si gogre tari rem gogre sinkin rabo ta tende ke hidop ya je pe tap je ta tene je sela dungal ta tene tikap sala nyemo bala sopa mechewe tap rabo je tene lepo jambo ta lepo se jute pe kalchewa tene je jingen bandapo tende chundri tela kashira tene pena ngarang ngoma ndejong lumbala meche henro kapsala tene po gemba ta po chungwa ta po gemba tenzo ta sashala choba jap tene baba ga sasate kashi gisena ngalagu kashi gisena kolagu tene solo tegre phagi baba tondro kapla ta suso che gogre sete baba ke dan jala menjala tene ke jap tende se tu be ta tenda bo chiching yamba chona be tapcha dabo che yungre la tene tindi nyoda me pan jombu che ta tene tikap tna la yina ya che nyangi si ta shendo gre dupore sene ngo tende sena ya ta tronki tela sem joan dabo ta tende jongi jose gre la tende nyangi dabo ya mepa te si semba ya pache pe tap dabo che ta sem che ta che ripadem tu pe tap la jambu ta yapu che thaki ten che te pe kalchim.
During this whole process, first of all, the dying person may obviously become quite fearful or possibly very sad at the idea of death and anxious about what is going to occur. They may be somewhat tormented by a feeling of clinging to this life and to others around them. None of this, of course, is going to help them very much. So the dying person, him or herself, needs to remind themselves that they can't allow themselves to be overcome by panic. And at this time, the best thing you can do to start with is to pray to the objects of faith, those in whom you have the greatest faith. And at the same time, let go as much as you can of what you are leaving behind. And be as attentive as possible, because as you die, you have to make sure that you can find the right path, make the right choices. Now, if there is a caregiver present, this person can help very much in this process by providing the right environment, support, and conditions for the dying person. Fundamentally, the caregiver should do whatever he or her can to encourage the person and to dispel their fear and anxiety. On the one hand, you have to remind the person to be attentive. Remind them that this is a time of great and crucial opportunity for them. But you also need to try to allow them to relax as much as possible, and especially allow the dying person to be as free from kleshas of all kinds as they can. You want to especially avoid situations like the following. Once in Sikkim, I saw someone pass away, and while he was dying, his sons were fighting over the land that they were due to inherit. And they actually involved their father in the dispute and were trying to force him, as he was dying, to say who was going to get how much of the land and so on. And they were yelling at him. You don't want that going on. Another thing that you don't want is if the relatives or other loved ones are so attached to the person who is dying that they are grieving uncontrollably in the person's presence and start to exclaim things like, "You're dying, I can't stand it, don't leave me behind," and so on. This is obviously going to upset the person unnecessarily. So you want to avoid those situations of either aggressive disputation or excessive displays of grief. And you want to provide as much as possible an environment where the person can concentrate and be as cheerful under the circumstances as they can.
Tene ta tela ta tangpo nyonga tembe ke chol de song yore la. Tene ti jel nyonga tembe ke so tembe ka so nyomling kan de riba kan de dem ko ye patin so yore la. Tene ta tangpo nyonga ina ni ta sawa sai kamte chola tem ta de zang kurte he yong ka top ji tini sai kom ti chola tem dog yore la tin ti ka so la che ta la kan de yung yore sin lu ji top ti chong dun ro ni ti lu ji top chor ta tin de yung yore tini ta te la nang ta la kan de yung yore sin na tini ti ka so la hipa tipo do hipa masawa tin de yung yo ba jai ta tene son to la kande yung yore se na vesal mijutabo se ta te si chuni gen hoanda bo lam sa masal nambanda bo khari yung yore la ta te sacholat betore ta te ji so la tene ta te zangkhor gen nani hinge zangkhor ti gen ni pa te nyom ne teni ta te ka sala cho mela tham dog yore la teni cho mela tham do du che ta la kan de yung yore se na ka da je tin zo kombo da bo cha ta tin de yung yore la nong ga ta la teni sem te chabe chube da bo tin de yung yore chage chige da bo tin de yung yore so re teni ta te ka sala sang ta la kan de yung yore se na teni ta te ta hi 미주 타고 메살 와데 테시 도와 타고 손네 테시 아살도 손네 텔레종 테시 추니가 노한다고 테살도 도요레.
Our text first describes what happens when the 5 elements dissolve, and thereafter provides advice for specific practices to be done during each stage. The first stage of dissolution is the dissolution of the element of solidity, earth, into cohesion, or water. And this is caused by the destruction or breakdown of the channels at the navel chakra. The external or outer sign of this, what is observable by others, is that the dying person will lose physical strength, lose the ability to support or easily move their body. The inner sign will be that the cognition of the dying person will become far less clear, far less lucid than it has been up to that point. The secret sign, the attendant emergence of the appearances of dharmata, is that there will be in the dying person's perception a vague appearance of the display of dharmata, something like a mirage. And this is the beginning, the very beginning of the appearances of the clear light. After that, the next channels to break down are those in the heart chakra. And this causes the dissolution of water into the element of fire. The outer or external sign is that the mouth, nose, and so forth of the dying person will dry up. They will come to have a dry mouth and so on. The inner sign will be that the person's mind will become disturbed and wild or agitated. And the secret sign is that the previous appearances of dharmata that were like a vague glistening or mirage will intensify and will somewhat coalesce and will appear something like smoke.
Tene ta te jesla ta tsangkurganani ndrembe tsangkurte nupate nyam te nyambala tene me komte ta tanda me komte longa tamdo yorela tene me komte longa tambe ge la tene kadang nai o denzo tangmo da che la kadang nai o denzo tangmo jog yore nang ge la tene hipati ta semte kapkala sal zum kapkala masal wandabo tende yong yore tene ta tejendo tene sang la ta ta yetile chuni ge no wandabo te teji sardu sone ta kam dana la pe na simbu mecher tabo marchem chem tene teji no hyar ge yore so je ta tene teji sola tsangkur ge nani sani tsangkur te nipa nyong ge yore la tene te la khande yong ge yore se na tene long ge kham de number hiba la tamne tene ta ti long ge kham de number hiba la tamundu che ta la tene o se la tangwa tang na du ngup tu te se kale kapo da bu ge number da bu tene yong ge yore la tene o ge jo ate cheda se ge yore tene nang ge ta la tene no ate sinda manda shar ge yore 노안다 만다 샤르 온두 테라 카리레세나 다 랭엠바 이나 테지 랭이 소이가 바틴데 이나 테니 테지 지토가 남반다 보체다 테니 레종보 소이가 요나 제 가위가 남바 데지가 남반다 보텐데 샤르 용리요레 테니 상토 라 주니가 노아테 살보르런 차네 remember 와타 보티니 템보다 보체 테지 당 ngaran nyomnyom me pache ina gam jingwon che ge yo ma de ina ye te ji ti no de tempo da bo ji yung de yo re
Next, the channels of the throat chakra will break down, and as a result, the element of fire will dissolve into the element of wind. The external sign or the outer sign of this is that the dying person's breath will become cold, and the warmth of their body will start to diminish. The internal sign is that their cognition will oscillate back and forth from a state of lucidity and into a state of obscurity, and then back again, back and forth between those two. The secret sign is that the appearances of Dharmata will increase somewhat and become like flashes, small flashes of red light, something like the appearance of fireflies. Next, the channels of the secret chakra will break down, and this will cause the element of wind to dissolve into consciousness. The external or outer sign of this is that the person will start to have considerable difficulty of breathing in and out. Their breathing may almost stop at this point. The inner sign will be that they will start to have various hallucinations. Various things will appear to them. Generally speaking, those whose karma is, for the most part, bad, will see things that are very scary. And those whose karma is, for the most part, good, will see things that they perceive as quite pleasant. At the same time, the secret sign is that the appearance of Dharmata becomes more stable. Rather than being like fireflies flashing, it becomes like the flame of a lamp. In spite of the stability of the appearance of Dharmata at this point, if the person has no previous training, they will not recognize it.
Tene ta teji sula ta tanda te ta zangkhor ge nubati nyamne long tenzo che la che them ne tene ta ti long ge nubati nyong tene ombo tong chenchi tenzo te si yalne tene mai nawa na che lu ge nubati nyamne che make zone thom to pa nawe da tu to pa la so pa yung yo la Tati kapsala teni che su chi se o de chi do jua me panda bo che la teni ti kap tna la ta khandi sung yo re se na no hi nam khala them sin rang number hi pa te teni pa tombe chorwan do bo che yong ta tin de yung yo re la ta te la ti ta bu ge long de ta sa che me long de che la che them be ge ta de ta thumong ge che ta yi kap ka la na sa yang yen ta ge na sa ge che par ge kha hi chur su ya yo re tin de song yo re la tini ta te ji so ta te ge ta te che yong na rem ji do ge chur de Tati tangbo che nongwa te pa yargi yor. Ta nang number hipate tem. Nang number hipate che la che tem yung yor la. Nang number hipate la yang. Tene tati la tene ta chitang nang number hipate la. Chitang ong tsen number hipat su ji. Naranzo. Number hipat su ji se na ta make number hipat na number hipat na number hipat. J number hipato, Luigi number hipato, Yiji number hipa, Tita Niemo be, Tankin number hipat, J, Tangarans number Sanjipe, Tawala Sungiore, Tati, Chitanga, Zog no Hina. Tati in Jura Tela, Namto go on to Siena, Tene, Tatu Jundo, Nembedenegan Sona, Dojing Achitachi sen. Tene Dojing Achitachi de Tati, Namto Dramanda, Mambo Charni, Sente Koran Janson Raboji Imbala, no heat into Janson Raboji Imbala. Tene Tinani and Dojig Namto Tenzo, Tene Balat Raboji Jansone, Tati in Jura number Natsupa Yungi or La. Tene Tig in Jura Tela Tene Doji Sena. Tene Kapnder. Sauna, Deshot number topaton, Hedong number topaton, Temuk number top, Desin sum the Vojicine, Tinitenzo Song Yorella, Tinitea, Tatanda Zankurgan Nubatinzo, Nyam, Zankurgan Nubatinzo, Nyamne, Tenita Umegan Nubati, Ta Solung de, Za Umenan de Yorella, Solung de Za Umenan de Yapatella. Teni tujundo tasu saumate sonunge ya kani teni koran supo de tempo yapate teni ya umege yana la teni pali top karcha teni ume manala mali top marcha nipote yapare Tene te tanda so de pekala ta kuni tempo nene. Tene za omega nando so no tempo ne de te la tene lute debo ndabo ti yungu yore la. Tan chewe ka sala kandi yungu yore se na tene ti ge so no ge nuba de nyong de te la tene karcha de ma tordo yung. Tene marcha de ya jendo yung ne tene ti ge tene kalam ge no ata malam ge no ata nalam ge no ata so hargi yore la. Tene te nang ne ta tangbo kalam ge no harne. Pali topi ge tene karcha de ma tordo yung ala tene kalam ge no hargi yore. Tene kalam ge no hardu te la tene tamchi che karlame yepet no anda bo che ta sem ge la nanto te sem ge den chorwanda ko ta tende ji yung yo re la tene ti chung ge kap la nang ge number to ba le tene ta ti ge sal che hyu nda bo te hedang le chur nang to yin pe chen na hedang le chur nang to ten zo ta te rang yin je ju to bang ga se ta ji dang ge sem nang to man da wa je ju ge ji nda bo che nang yo re la tene ti ge wang ge tene hedang le chur to ba sun ju sa sam te nga ta te rang yin ki pa yal ni te kalam ga no de harong di hedang ga nam to ten zo nga ro yo re tene ti kap ji chorwa te ji tene chorwa te dungal ga nam banda bo mai ba dewe nam banda bo ta tende har ne tene ti ge karcha kalam ga no har.
While all of this is going on, while these channels are breaking down, the winds are dissolving, and the elements are dissolving one into another, what accompanies this is a gradual impairment of the senses. That is to say, the dying person gradually stops being able to see, hear, smell, taste, and even feel. At the culmination of this process, the breathing, what is called the external breathing, which means the breathing as we usually use the term, stops. With the cessation of the breathing, then the element of consciousness dissolves into space. Now, everything up to this point is called external and common, which means that up to this point, resuscitation may be possible. In other words, you can get to this point, and a little bit after this point, and still be brought back to life. Essentially, what is happening in this period of external death or external dissolution is the dissolution or withdrawal of external appearances. What follows after this, what's called the internal death or the internal dissolution, is the dissolution of consciousness. Now, generally speaking, in most Buddhist traditions, we talk about 8 consciousnesses: the eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mental consciousness, consciousness of mental affliction, and the all basis consciousness. And also, generically, the mental formations or mental events, the types of thoughts which occur within the 6th consciousness in particular, are classified as 51 types of mental events. The relationship between the consciousnesses and thoughts is very much like the relationship between the ocean and waves. The consciousness of a person is like the ocean. Thoughts are like the waves which constitute the turbulence on that ocean's surface. In this context, however, thoughts are divided into 80 types of thoughts. And generically, they are said to be of 3 types: thoughts connected with anger, thoughts connected with desire, and thoughts connected with stupidity. These will gradually dissolve. And the dissolution or cessation of these 3 different types or 80 varieties of thinking constitute the process of the internal dissolution. During your life, from among the 5 winds, the life wind or vitality wind abides within the central channel, the avaduti. And as long as it remains there and remains active and functional, you are alive. One of the things that the life wind does is keep the fundamental constituents which you received from your parents at the time of conception in their proper places. Because the life wind fills the central channel, it keeps the white constituent which you received from your father at the top of the central channel and keeps it from falling down. It also causes the red constituent which you received from your mother at the bottom of the central channel and keeps it from floating up. As long as all of this remains in place and functional, you stay alive. But as you are dying, finally, the life wind starts to weaken and be withdrawn into itself. As it is withdrawn, the white and red constituents are no longer kept in place. And as they move, the one descending and the other ascending until they meet in the heart, various things happen. First of all, through the withdrawal of the life wind, the white constituent obtained from your father starts to descend through the central channel from the top of your head. As it does, the dying person experiences everything going white. You experience a complete and pervasive perception of whiteness. The cognitive experience which goes along with that is the cessation of the first 33 of the 80 types of thoughts. And all 33 of these are varieties of anger. As angry thoughts are the clearest or most intense thoughts, they are the ones that subside first. And so as you experience this pervasive whiteness, all thoughts of anger stop. As a result, the experience of this stage of dying is pleasant. It is not unpleasant. You experience pleasure rather than suffering at this point.
Tene ta te yendla tene nipa te ta malam singi te hargi yorela malam singi te haria te tangbo tene ta mali top marcha te ya ro ne te yang ngul yung capsule ya pari yung capsule tene kanga ta ti kalam gi malam gno charne kanga marbu no char char yung du te la tene ta ti kapla number to ba yichu ngāga yorwa, number topa hijute, ndeshaga number topa, tigreite, ngāne, tini ya, tela ya, ta tikap tana la chitanga number hipatin so ngā yung kapsala, sorwa dunga number kanya yo mare, jay dewe number topa chiga ngona, droga yoba jay ta. Tini ta te yendo, tini jima nalam sege yorwa, nalam sedu, tini ta tige, te karchata marchani bote tati solung te mepala te ne karchata marchani bote nyamdo te tene ti kaptana la tene nalam sena tene je na tham ka nambanda bochi hargi yore la te harwe ka sala temu le chebe namto dain te ngandro du ta ti ge rangi je chu topa se ta rangi ke ngaranzo namto rakpa tenzo te se tingagi yore la tene ta ti kapla tene tanda tela karise na ta ti tsaata longda senta kanga tomate hinka la lebyongwa yinpichirna namka wesal la tem se tene jay tige ye wesal te hargi yore ye wesal te hargi yore te inaya ta tsendala gombe nyamnyong te si yona te nyamnyong ta ngwa hipanda bochi ina ta te ingantuwa somne wesal mabu ngonche bata bochi yungi yaba jay ta Tini jay zani goma nyungwa nyamnyung mepa dhabo jay na tini te la tikap tana la jay ngarapa jal soni nuwa dhabo jay mato uni jay wesa te sharjung sombe tsorwa dhabo te shirwa mepa tindi yungi yuwa re la tini jungsin teacher na ta tanda jitanga ngaranzo hini ji tingen zin yin na yung rong wangtong ka tingen zin yin na yung rong te te zi gom ju te pe kalcham.
After that, the red constituent obtained from your mother will start to rise up the central channel. And as it does so, you'll experience a pervasive redness, which is to say everything will turn red. Previously, everything had turned white. Now, all appearances just become an appearance of redness. Along with this, the next 40 of the 80 types of thoughts will stop. And these 40 thoughts are all thoughts connected with desire. As these stop, the previous experience of well-being will, if anything, increase. So again, there's no experience of suffering or displeasure at this point. Now, the next thing that happens is because the life wind is no longer functioning at all, there is nothing keeping the white and red constituents apart. So they meet in the center of the body at the level of the heart. And when they meet at the heart, the preceding experience of redness becomes an experience of absolute and pervasive blackness. When that arises, at the same time, the remaining 7 types of thought, all of which are connected with stupidity, stop. So at this point, all 80 types of manifest thinking have ceased temporarily. Because of the shutdown of the life wind and all of its related functions, all of your winds and your mind are gathered together in the heart. When that happens, the next stage of dissolution, which is called the dissolution of space into the clear light, occurs. And it is at this moment that the ground clear light appears to the person. Now, if you have familiarized yourself with the clear light in life through the practice of meditation, you may be able to recognize the ground clear light at this point. But if you have not familiarized yourself with it, then you will experience this moment merely as a state of unconsciousness, because you have there's no condition for recognition. And this is one of the reasons why the practices of meditation, such as tranquility and insight, are of such importance.
Tene ta te ya tikap tana la hine ki tingen zai ay tikap tana me hite ma ta tujon tu hine ki tingen zai te gom to ya ang tang bu chong ya bu gom to ba te ta ba ma jong na ya ta hine ki te le ba sang la te ngarang te tempo zo ju ya ba nda bu ji chong na tene tikap tana la ta te ripa te sal to ten to tene imbe cherna hine ki tingen zai ripa tenzo te ne tene te ga no tenzo ya ngui sein no tenzo ngui sambala te ne tene jai rang ke ta tan da nyam ne si pe kap sala jitang ke tene sanji ji su tempa chu ji su tempa gendin ji su tempa tingen zi ji su tempa yam je lat ji su tempa si ji su tempa to ta tende sungyo re la tene ti kap la sanji ji su ten to pa ta bo tene sanji ke chlap njuk to pa ta bo tene tambi chu ji su tempa tene te gen do tene papa gen den ji su tempa ta te ta bo tene sorwa tap to pa nalam jap to pa tene te gen do tanda tingen zi ji su tempa yiram jala ji su tempa ta tenzo ji su tene tene sorwa tap nalam jap tende siena ta tiki silam jo tuki yo pa jay ta tene ngarang ke tingen zi ji su tempa la tene tingen zi ji sarcha ten rogi yo pa cher rogi yo pa ta tenzo yimbe cherna hine ji tingen zi tsenda la gomba la pe 디캅트나 펜토 첨부 용기요래라 되네 혼통 체버진 냠뇽지 여나다 데라 되네 코라 왜서 마분 트이네 배 야부 용기요래라 되네 대정게 힘이다 혼통 그 띵엔정게 냠뇽 메나야 제때 september 히히 야부 제때 톱나야 다 랑게 센데 랑게 다보자네 녀몬보 온도 마히로와 농토고 온도 마히로와 되네 디캅트나 테지 손데다보다 텐힌다보 텐톱나야 배 디캅트나 펜토 첨부 용기요래
Jidin rup suna nga mato sumanda.
마마도 상마도 게스트 방아이 나도
Nga yorbe.
네
The practice of tranquility meditation.
동아 게스트 말에 당가랑 그 선음 조사 받대죠
통화 주스데마.
동아 게스트
The practice of tranquility meditation, in particular, is of great benefit during these stages of dissolution. If someone has achieved the consummate training in tranquility meditation, or at the very least some degree of mental stability through that practice, then as the stages of dissolution occur, their awareness will actually become more and more stable and lucid. And this provides them the ability to recognize the stages of dissolution in general as they occur. During this whole process, it is of great benefit to bring forth what are called the 6 recollections. And these are 6 things which should be thought of at this time. These are the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, Samadhi, one's Yidam, and generosity. Through recollecting the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha while you are dying, then you are able to pray to them. Through recollecting your samadhi, your preceding practice of meditation, such as the meditative state of tranquility and so on, you are able to reinstate it or actually practice it during the stages of dissolution. And through recollecting generosity, you are able to recollect your accumulation of merit and make aspirations based on that. Through recollecting your yidam, you are able to supplicate and make aspirations as well. So through recollecting these things, you can actually gain some freedom within the process of dissolution. If in addition to this, the person has developed a authentic realization of insight, then they have the further opportunity to recognize the ground clear light when it arises. But even lacking that, if you have developed some training in mindfulness and alertness, this will give you the ability to take possession or control of your mind and go through the process of dying consciously. So I'll stop there for this morning and we'll meditate a little bit.
Amen.